to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, this is a place to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the Krypt at kuldrinskrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, we're going to get into basic safety, but first, as usual, I have to welcome my amazing co-host, Funsize. Hello, Funsize.
Hello, Master Kuldrin.
How are you today?
Wonderful. How was your rope demo yesterday?
It was really cool. I'm going to be posting those videos in the membership site probably within the next few weeks. So all of our members look forward to that. If you're interested in becoming a member, just visit kuldrinskrypt.com, click on the membership tab. Before we get into basic safety, which for transparency's sake, I have to say that this is the third time that we have attempted to record this because there is just so much involved with it. So those of you who are asking for the longer episodes, you're definitely going to get it with this one. So with that said, here are those rules to love by. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, KNKI from the KNKI app, available on all platforms, that stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And third, the quote from Mr. Paul Young: submission is not about authority and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, Matt pledging $10 a month, and K2SO giving $1, also the Accidental Trucker giving $1 a month. We do have a goal of $30 a month so that we can maintain the cost of weekly episodes. Otherwise, unfortunately, we're going to have to go to 2 episodes a month if we have not met our goal of $30 a month by the end of September. So if you are getting anything out of the show, Funsize and I would greatly appreciate it so that we can maintain those weekly episodes. Go to kuldrinskrypt.com/contact resources. You will find the link to our Patreon page there. Also, of course, I would like to thank Lily at bdsmcontracts.org. She gives us these wonderful 25-page contracts to give out. These come in soft and hardbound. We give these out on our Facebook page. So if you're not part of that, just search Kuldrin's Krypt on Facebook so you can be part of the giveaways. All right, Funsize. Now that that is out of the way, we've thanked everyone that we need to thank today. Let's jump into this basic safety with our basic definition. Fire at will.
Basic safety defined is the steps we should all take to ensure the well-being of our partners mentally, physically, and emotionally. Pretty basic. I think we also need to do a quick review of hard, soft limits and the use of safe words and signals, which is something that we've already talked about in several episodes. But for anyone just catching the show, I think that's important to go over. Hard limits are the limits that we set that are firmly in place. They're non-negotiable at that given time. Soft limits are limits that are open to negotiation in the right scene. And safe words or hand gestures are used to signify where a bottom is physically, mentally, or emotionally during a scene. And I know you just added a great, big, huge, wonderful article on silent hand signals for that use on our FetLife group, Kuldrin's Krypt. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that pretty much hits the review really well. So let's jump into the physical safety and preparation for a scene. Things like stretching, taking a mild pain reliever, drinking water. I think a lot of people have a fear of taking a break in a scene to drink water. Some people say that, why would you want to take a pain reliever before you start a scene? Because that's the whole point of it. What are your thoughts on this stuff?
Well, as far as the water goes, you don't necessarily have to take a break in the scene to drink water. You can make it part of your scene. I can't tell you how many times I've had a sub and I've literally put a bottle of water with a straw in front of their face and told them they're going to drink that bottle. And then I'm waiting and I'll stand there tapping my toe, with the whole dominatrix attitude going and make it part of the scene. But it's also very good for my sub to do because it keeps them hydrated. So I'm a huge fan of that approach to things. When it comes to pain relievers, I've got to say, when you get into a particularly intense scene, the after effects is a lot like coming back from having the flu, the aches, the pains, the fatigue. Taking a couple of Tylenol a couple hours ahead of time really helps cut that back, and I don't think anyone likes the after effects of the flu. So you can still enjoy the pain of the scene itself without having the intense ache afterwards while still enjoying that sunburn feel at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of common sense on that one. If people really think about it, they'll realize that, if you take a couple of aspirin or Tylenol or something and you stub your toe, it's still going to hurt. You're still going to feel it. So it's not like it's really removing it. I try to think back to my beginnings, and for me, it kind of helps prevent that initial train wreck or the day after a car wreck feeling. Percusio, my bottom, my play partner, after the rope demo last night, we went over to someone's house, watched the fight on pay-per-view, the Mayweather fight. And before it got started, I was showing somebody my toy box, and I'd got a couple of new toys. So I went in, grabbed her, and she was more than willing. And of course, today when I got up, I checked in with her, and she's talking about the sunburn feeling. And I definitely think about you when I sit down or when I lean up against the back of the chair, something like that. Those are the good owies, from what I understand, from bottoms or submissives. That gives you that reminder. But it's that, like you said, the flu feeling, or like you've been in a car wreck, and anybody that's ever been in a car wreck knows what I'm talking about there. The general aches and pains that you're trying to avoid. So it's not so much in the scene that it's an avoidance of pain. It's a certain type of pain, the bad pain. And I've caught some slack on that before because I've offered people some pain relievers before we've got started, and they just look at me funny. But after you explain it, it does make sense. So I just really wanted to point that out so people could understand a little bit better where we're coming from on that one. Headspace. That's an interesting subject. Some people can jump right into it with no problem. Other people do need time to prepare. So how do you go about preparing for that? What do you have to say?
For me, what it takes to get into headspace, whether I'm the top or the bottom for a particular scene, is I have to take a deep breath, count to 10, and take another deep breath, and I'm usually pretty good to go. Because I luckily am one of those people who can basically just jump into it. But when I'm taking that deep breath and counting to 10, I'm also clearing my head and letting go of everything else except for what is about to happen. Because it's very important to kind of check in with yourself and clear your own head so that you are mentally and emotionally prepared and going to be at your safest for a scene beforehand. And I really think that's very important for everyone to do.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out that doesn't mean that you're not going to hit some landmines occasionally. But if you do, hopefully you'll be a little bit better prepared for them. For me, most of the time I can jump right into it. There are those times that there may be, like last night, that wasn't planned out, but I was just able to go right into it without any real transition period longer than just the thought hitting my mind of, okay, let's do this. And Percusio, she is the same way, but there are times when I may need, if there's a lot going on in my life, I'm going to need a bit of a heads up, possibly 24 hours or so. And if you're not prepared, don't feel an obligation to do it. That's one of the worst things. Yeah, subs often feel an obligation. That's just part of it, to please sir. But yeah, it's not healthy. If you're not prepared for it, just ask that it be delayed a little bit. And the same thing for tops or dominance is, don't be afraid to say no when it comes to it. If someone is asking you to play and you're just not there, then chances are you're going to hurt somebody, or there's a higher chance that you're going to hurt somebody in a bad way. So don't be afraid to say, no, I can't get into that mental state to be able to scene right now. So moving on. Now, this is one that I have a massive issue with as far as people doing this. I had somebody the other night contacting me, begging me to play with them. And I was under the impression that they were very intoxicated. Come to find out they were not. It was a medical issue. But regardless, they were not in the right frame of mind. So on top of drugs or alcohol, if they have a medical condition that can cause their mental state to be skewed, stay away from it. Wait for things to calm down. Now, I know that you feel very passionately about this as well, and I'm sure you've got a lot to say on this topic.
Yes, I do. And I feel like we're almost talking about it without what it is. The next thing on our show notes here that we're talking about is not imbibing in drugs or alcohol previous to or during scenes. And the reason why that is so big for me is because it inhibits your decision making and therefore the consent that you're giving. It hits along the same lines as date rape to me if you're letting your partner drink or take any sort of drugs that can inhibit their decision making. So I feel like that's pretty important. And then if they have taken something, it's harder to tell if you have crossed their limits or not, simply because not only does it inhibit their consent giving, but it delays their responses to how they're feeling about things. It can delay a pain response in a submissive, and that can be dangerous. It can delay a response to an issue for a dominant. It's just such a big safety risk that I can't not throw that one out there.
Yeah, and especially in a day and age where it's such a push with consent counts, which I don't have a problem with, but on college campuses, they're issuing consent cards to people to have filled out by partners, which I think is about I have mixed feelings on that, but the fact remains that if someone is in an altered state of mind due to alcohol, drugs, a medical condition, as I faced the other day, then just stay away from it. It would be better to have to deal with somebody being a little angry at you because you didn't play with them than it would be to break somebody's limits. So, okay, here's one. What about just knowing what you're doing?
Oh, that is so vital. I can't tell you how many times this issue has come up with people that are new or starting out, or even people that have been in the lifestyle for years and years, and they'll pick up some new implement and automatically assume that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I have recently seen that and was with someone that I've kind of taken under my wing, bought some new toys, and one of them I know for a fact that he's never used before, but yet I got a message last night, it had a picture of all of his toys laid out and said broke them all in on his play partner last night. And
oh dear.
like, all of them? Yeah, all of them. It was awesome. One of them, you've never used anything like it. So why would you do that? You're taking major risks. Even though this particular toy was not one of the more advanced toys, it still deserves the respect, and the play partner deserves the respect of you practicing with it first.
I'm sorry, I have to argue with the phrasing that you just used. Advanced toys. I don't believe there's anything necessarily such a thing as an advanced toy, because depending on who you are, how you play, and your experience level, anything could be an advanced toy. Everything could be, or nothing could be. I've seen people injure others simply spanking with their hands, and that could easily be argued that your hands are the most basic toy that you have on your disposal at all times. So I'm sorry, Kuldrin, I have to argue with that particular phrasing, but I do agree with what you're getting at there.
It's an interesting standpoint. I don't know. I do feel that some toys are more advanced than others, but there again, we don't have to share in the same opinion. I think, mine comes from seeing somebody pick up a single tail and the recipient of that lashing needing 14 stitches because the person didn't know what they were doing, or the person receiving the lashes didn't know what they were doing. I think some toys, you take floggers, and floggers are the most basic. They are considered the intro toy for a lot of really good reasons, and that is because it is pretty difficult to hurt somebody with them. And I still believe that every type of implement deserves some time to practice. As you know, my wife has let her inner sadist out and is trying things, and I've maintained a very solid practice regimen for her before I allowed her to actually flog someone. Not that she is submissive to me, just that she is basically my student, and so I make sure of that. If you misstrike with a standard suede flogger, standard 30 falls flogger, and you catch somebody in the center of their back, there's very little risk of damage there if they don't have any medical conditions already. So it's not such a bad thing. And that's why I would not consider that an advanced toy. However, you go to single tail whips or knife play, something of that nature, chainmail floggers, those I would definitely consider advanced. Even a dragon tail, I would consider an advanced toy because you can really, really screw somebody up with that. And it takes a lot more practice to get your accuracy down, because it's way more vital that you have really good accuracy with something like that. So that's why I differentiate between more of the beginner toys and the advanced toys.
My point in my disagreement was that it's all about perspective and where you're willing to put your work, because you do have to put in work to learn any implement.
Oh, yeah. I agree. That does need to be pointed out. It doesn't matter how beginner or how advanced it is or the person wielding the implement is. The practice does need to take place before before anybody is struck with it. I think we can absolutely agree on that.
Yes. So along with understanding the implements that we use and knowing what we're doing with them, it's also important to understand the risk that we're taking. And that's where rack, prick, and SSCI, as we like to call it here, come into play. But going back to how the implements are safely and correctly used, do you have any particular tips for that?
For me, I think the most important thing is, alongside of practice, is instruction from someone who knows that implement very well and can guide you in that practice. Because if you just pick it up, and I don't care if you have 6 hours, 8 hours a day, and do that for months before you strike anybody with it, if you are practicing in the wrong ways or just don't have the correct knowledge of where it's okay to hit, where it's not okay to hit, the techniques that each implement requires, then you're just reinforcing 8 hours a day for 6 months, bad habits, and absolutely incorrect information. So that's another great thing about being part of FetLife and going to Munches, is you are going to find someone who is trustworthy and who has the knowledge and the desire to teach. So I think for me, that's just the most important part of any type of impact play or implement play at all, whether it's impact or not. You?
I definitely have to agree with you there. There's a code amongst most veterans about taking on students, taking on junior tops, that we should be teaching them. And that's something that we all often practice, something that I certainly benefited from in my own training, in my own life.
Yeah. So you had mentioned rack, prick, and of course SSCI. Everyone that listens knows what that is. It's part of the rules to live by: safe, sane, consensual, and informed. As long as it is considered safe by the general population and sane by the general population, of course, consent matters. And then you're informed about it. All parties are informed. And that one can be an interesting thing, because if you're doing something in public, then the people who might wander by, they are not informed, therefore they could not consent. So you got to think about everyone involved, everyone that is watching, not just the people who are participating in the actual play part of the scene. And rack being
risk-aware consensual kink.
Yes, that is more of what I practice as a veteran. I think SSCI is a good place to start. I know in our local community, there are a couple of people that are avidly against SSCI, and that is because it is so based on perspective and perception that they just feel that it's very dangerous, because some people really just have no clue as to what safe or sane really is. So they push more toward the risk aware side, and everybody just knowing what it is that they're doing, and that education and knowledge, which I absolutely don't disagree with. What about prick? That is a new one. So where do you stand with it? First, what is it?
It is personal risk-informed consensual kink. To me, it's more along the lines of rack, than SSCI in the sense that they definitely want us to be risk aware. But the personal risk, it makes you more self-aware, self-evaluate, and more responsible for yourself and what you're engaging in, because truly we have to be adults about this. And I'm not just saying that in the legal sense that we all have to be adults about this, which is very important, but in the sense that we all have to be mature about it and all have to take our own personal selves into consideration and be responsible for ourselves. I'm very fond of Prick, but at the same time, I feel like it's...
I bet you are.
Thank you, Master Kuldrin. I feel like it's not necessarily something that many newbies would be comfortable with right out of the gate, simply because they don't have the experiences built up yet to be personally risk informed about everything they're consenting to. So for newbies, I definitely recommend RAC and SSCI to get started, and maybe later as you grow and feel more comfortable and are more self-aware with your experiences and how you can and will handle things, you might evolve to the point where you wish to use Prick as your primary safety concern. But
now, my problem with it is this, and I just heard about this, a case where this took place out in California, where someone extremely violated someone else's personal boundaries, and their take on it was, well, you know what I do. We said that it was going to be prick play. So that's your problem. You should have researched me more thoroughly because you agreed to that, and it's your place to be informed, not mine. So there is potential, and that's why I don't like that, because it allows somebody to skirt a violation so easily. Well, you know how I play, so you should have made yourself aware because you agreed upon that.
That's exactly why I said it was not for newbies.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly why it is so important, even in the middle of the scene, if you are starting to feel like you're becoming violated, whether it's prick or not, you need to call a red flag on that. Call your safe word, do your hand signal.
Mm-hmm.
Get yourself out of that situation, and don't be afraid that you're saying no and that means that you are somehow doing something wrong. You are actually communicating, which is the best thing you could possibly do, and preventing something from going wrong in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very important to not be afraid with that. And I think you definitely bring up a valid point about prick.
I don't care for it, to be perfectly. The more I've thought about it, when I was first understanding the new thing, but I think that really goes along with the way that the world is going now, where everybody is just looking for an opportunity to skirt responsibility. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I completely disagree with it. I don't like it at all, because it gives everyone involved the ability to say, you should have known, it's all on you, it's your fault. That's like no different to me than looking at a rape victim and saying, oh, well, you should have known when you went out with them that they get rapey. You should have vetted them better or something like that. And sometimes even through the vetting process, though it is, if done correctly, it can greatly limit your chances for abuse. It's not going to eliminate the opportunity there. So people get this in their head and they will see a way out if they're the predator or the abuser. I don't like it.
I would just like to say that I don't think prick is about skirting your responsibilities. I think the very nature of skirting your responsibilities is a predatory act and is abusive. So anyone that's going to skirt their responsibilities in order to get what they want and go, oh, I'm that way, I play prick and I told you, that's not really following prick. That's just being abusive and using it as an excuse. To me, it's the same as an abuser going, oh, I love you, that's why I hit you. Things like that. And that's never okay. I feel like prick is more about being personally responsible and going, okay, so I know that I might end up needing stitches if I allow a whip to be used on me and I flinch at the wrong moment. Taking that personal responsibility and going, okay, I flinched, this is my fault, what can I do next time to make it better? That is prick. But it's not, oh, I'm going to skirt my responsibilities. That's just abusive behavior.
It is abusive behavior, and abusers are going to abuse, but there's also enough studies and statistics done that prove that people who have some form of enablement, which to me, again, if somebody is abusive by nature, that little enabling side may be all that they need to push them to that point. And that does take place. Like I said, there are plenty of studies done to show that. So here again, I guess this is two things that we're just going to have to agree to disagree on and let the listeners decide for themselves which way they want to go. I think out of this conversation, the one part of it that we absolutely agree on is that prick and pretty much rack is not really where they need to start out. Or SSCI for that matter. They don't need to start with any of these three. What they need to start with is education, learning what it is about, what it's supposed to be about. Go to Munches, find a mentor, and obtaining as much knowledge as they can before they start to really play or enter into a DS relationship. Can we agree to disagree except for on that fact?
Oh, absolutely.
It is all about safety, which we're going to get into that a little bit more with next week's episode as well when we talk about your first play party and give some information. And how that relates is that if it's your first one, that is part of your educational process and you don't need to play. But like I said, we'll get into that next week. Moving on, if you're ready.
I am ready. I think we really need to get more in depth on these implements, though.
No, I agree. You're obviously eager, so have at it.
To me, it's just important to understand the tools and implements which you're using. And each implement in our toolbox, no matter what it is, even our hands, has certain risk involved if used incorrectly or before we're ready to use them. That goes back to what we were talking about before with having someone to learn from, learning the proper techniques. Scalpels versus usual knife play is a prime example of this. You can go, oh, I've played with knives, I'm fine with it, it's part of fear play, and it's not that bad, and a scalpel is just a type of knife, except for a scalpel's not. A scalpel is a very particular type of knife used to peel flesh apart, and that's something that is so much more risky in play than a knife would be. So it's important to understand that that tool in particular is not really for beginners. I don't really even recommend knives for beginners because fear play is so dangerous.
So are you saying that a scalpel would be an advanced implement?
I am saying that scalpels take a certain skill set.
Uh-huh.
You're just determined to make me eat my words, aren't you?
Have some crow, dear. Have some crow. Candles and hot wax play. Now, this is one that I don't really talk about. In fact, I don't think I've ever mentioned it in an episode, even before you jumped on board. This is one of my favorite things. I absolutely love wax. Now, it can vary greatly based on the type of wax used. Paraffin, as you and I both know, that's the safest form of wax to use because that has an extremely low melting point. But different dyes or different colored candles will have a different sensation to them because the melting point of the dye, once it gets mixed in with the paraffin, is going to change things. So be very aware of that. I highly recommend trying these things on yourself on the underside of your forearm where it's most sensitive, and different heights that you're dripping this wax on is going to also change because that little time between where it leaves the candle and when it hits your arm, it's going to have a brief cooling period. So really play around with that. And I think most people enjoy checking that one out. So I could be wrong, but
I would also like to throw out a few more tips when it comes to candle play because I too am a huge fan of this. Little known fact for most beginners, the second and third drop of wax actually has a bit more sting for the heat than the first drop will. So when you're trying them out, go a couple drops in. You'll really get the effect of what you're going to do to your bottom on yourself. And I have a personal note about the dyes. Just after Easter, I went to one of the local shops and they had a set of candles that were paraffin with neon colors for Easter that were on clearance. because they were Easter themed with little bunny faces etched into them. Very cute. So I picked them up, and they are so much hotter than the usual red and black dyed, and especially the clear or white dye candles that I usually buy. So much more. I would probably say close to about 30 degrees of difference in heat.
Wow.
Which is quite a bit. And then a tip for anyone using wax, I would also say to moisturize the skin before and after play, because wax can really leave a pretty harsh sting. And the moisturizing from certain lotions and oils can really help with that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, especially if you're the melted blocks of paraffin and you're brushing it on the skin using a paintbrush to paint it onto the skin as a base coat to help with the actual wax from a candle. A lot of people will put down baby oil first, and that's really sensual in itself because wax play is just so incredibly relaxing. If, say, you're laying on the bed or on a massage table, somebody is painting this hot wax across you, and then when it is cut and peeled off, most people describe it as like all of their stress is just being peeled right off with it. In fact, a lot of people will do a visualization while it's being removed. And most people, when you say wax play, they think some really hot sex scene or something. And it can be. And God, that's a lot of fun, but it can also be play by itself. And that's where most people really miss the mark when it comes to that, in my opinion.
For me, I go for the more spa settings, candlelit spa setting, stretch the sub out on a table, massage with this combination of orange and jasmine oil that I have that smells amazing to begin with. And then when you add that heat from that wax, the smell is just phenomenal. And you can make it a really sensual experience, and you add the fun of telling your sub they have to sit still for this when all they kind of want to do is either melt or squirm a little bit. So it's definitely a nice sensation play when done correctly, of course.
Yeah. So let's move into one of my favorite things. All of these are favorite things. God, I'm really greedy. Handcuffs. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you have a personal affinity for handcuffs, do you not?
I have a personal affinity for the real handcuffs. I'm very firmly against the cheap kind that you can find in say, Spencer's gift shops. Basically everywhere. They're like $10 there.
Now, why is that?
Have you ever been playing with those sets and you press them closed and then you can keep pressing and pressing and pressing and suddenly they flip open again?
No, actually I'll say no, because when it comes to toys, I always go for the quality. So I've never played with the cheap ones.
I have played with the cheap ones that other people have purchased, and just the very fact that they press close further and further means that when you put them on someone and that person starts to struggle, they're going to tighten and tighten and tighten until you have someone's wrist or ankles in such a tight binding that is cutting off circulation, doing nerve damage, and can actually cut into the flesh at that point. And that's just not okay. The real kind of handcuffs, the kind that law enforcement uses, the kind that you and I, of course, purchase and use, have a locking mechanism where once they're on, they don't get any tighter. So they're going to sit still. They're not going to hurt the person that we put them in. And it's so much safer that way.
Now, I know one of your big frustrations is something that I'm about to mention. And so go ahead and get ready to growl. But
okay.
What you're saying is that the cheap handcuffs are like using a silk tie on someone. All right. So I will go ahead and address this one for you.
Okay, thank you.
Because I know it just really gets on your nerves. Ladies and gentlemen, silk ties that are being sold as 50 Shades of Grey sets, and it doesn't matter the color. Yeah, no, there's no levity to be brought to this conversation. they will tighten. They will cinch on their own when someone struggles against them, kind of like a set of Chinese finger cuffs. So be very aware of that. Do not tie somebody up using a silk necktie. They're great for blindfolds, gags.
Sensation play. You can rub them all over your partner for sensation play. Go for that.
I knew you couldn't hold back.
You know me so well.
Yeah, so just know that, that's complete BS. Just stay away from it. Don't tie somebody up with them. They're going to cinch. And I know for the newer people and some of the really sadistic people that listen, that may sound like a good thing, but put your sadist away and focus on safety for just a second and really understand what's being talked about here, because it can hurt. A broken wrist is not a fun thing.
No.
So if you've got something cinching up on somebody and as they struggle against it, then there is a high probability that there could be nerve damage, whether it's temporary or permanent. Does not matter. Nerve damage is nerve damage. Broken bones, messed up tendons or ligaments, even a pulled muscle. It's going to hurt for a while, and that's not the kind of hurt that we want to give. In fact, when we're talking about restraining somebody, pain should be the very last thing that we're talking about in most cases. So
the only time I want to talk about pain when tying someone up is to avoid it. But that's just me.
Yeah, well, there are a few cases in rigging, but those are very specific things and getting into an advanced play technique.
Thank you once again, Master Kuldrin.
Anything I can do to make you laugh.
I truly appreciate that. You have been a constant source of joy in my life since we have met.
And you as well.
Thank you. Let's jump back into the actual show topic here. How about avoiding cheap toys in general?
Well, I thought that would be moving directly into what we were already talking about. Yeah, cheap toys, as I said, I always go for quality, and it's not because I'm smug, I'm arrogant. I want to say, well, I bought this toy from Whipping Stripes, which, by the way, is where I do get most of my toys, because they are actual members, very dedicated members of the lifestyle. They don't charge an outrageous amount, and their quality is superb. So, and I just want to give them a shout out. I talked to them a lot yesterday. I've purchased several toys from them, and they have no sponsorship to the show. They're not paying me to say this. I just really, really love them. They are amazing people. So, and you can find them on FetLife, Whipping Stripes. I believe it's one word. I'm sure you had something more specific that you wanted to say about avoiding cheap toys.
Yes, a few things. I would say to avoid cheap toys. I'm not saying specifically to avoid cheap as in the price. I mean cheaply made toys, because they typically break, they're harder to care for, and they cause more hurt than intended. Floggers, for example, our mutual favorite toy, I'm going to use as our example here. A cheap flogger, when you get it and you look at the tails, you'll have rougher pieces for the mop, and the edges won't have been rounded. So what's going to happen when you strike someone with that is you're more likely to break skin, leave marks. Not the kind of marks that we enjoy, the bad marks, the bad kind of hurt. Whereas the finer made floggers, and you have your whipping strikes that you like to purchase from, I have my own company that I like to purchase from. What they do is they round the edges so that you can get that deep tissue massage with the flogger for sensation play, so that you can bring the hurt but not the harm. And that's something very important when you're going out and finding toys, or when you're handcrafting toys, or any of that. It's very important to look for the finer quality so that you'll have a toy that lasts longer, does what you want, and removes some of the risk for you.
Yeah, what I look for is, to continue in your example of floggers, a tight braid in the handle, because that's not going to fall apart on you. You pretty much know from that. Most people that are going to use cheap leather aren't going to bother to have a really secured type braid, but you still need to check the quality of the leather, and that's really just a feel test, because if it's supposed to be a smooth leather and there's bumps in it or cuts or nicks, or you grip it really tight and run your finger down one of the falls, if there is basically a leather dust or little balls of leather coming off, if it's a suede flogger, then that is definitely not a quality leather that's been used. The thickness of it. Now, I will say that with whipping stripes, most of their general products do have falls that are either straight cut or angle cut at the tips, because a lot of people that I know will make adjustments to their fall tips anyway. Some of mine I will vibrate, cut like a snake's tongue, so there's actually 2 points coming out on them. For those that don't know, that is going to provide a really stingy sensation for somebody if you're using it more as a whip instead of a thuddy flogger sensation. But yeah, there are a lot of places that will round them, and you can always round them yourself, or you can order them that way. And that's another thing that tells me if a company or a person is making a quality product, is they will do custom orders for you. So that is also a requirement that I have when I am ordering from someone, is will they make custom orders? Because if they can't, then there's if they won't, there's a really good chance that they're ordering their stuff from some other country and then rebranding it as their own product, and you just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Or they just got some sort of factory where they're pressing out a mass-produced product that's going to be one of the cheaper models that you're just spending too much for at that point.
Yeah. So, and I don't mind saying, there's a lot of people that are charging $300 and $400 for a good quality flogger. I don't pay more than $80, $100 for one.
I think the most expensive flogger I've ever gotten was $85.
Yeah.
It was a really good quality with 4 colors to it in bull leather.
Yeah. Hey, you don't have to spend tons and tons of money. It's one of those sayings where money does not at all constitute quality. So
no.
It's about finding good products at an inexpensive price, not cheap, and there is a difference.
Yes.
All right, so there again, I've gotten into beating a dead horse, so let's move on. What about cleaning, conditioning, maintaining, and storing your implements correctly? What is the correct way to do this?
That depends on the implement itself and what it is made out of.
Well, let's maintain the flogger conversation here.
Okay, well, for me, my floggers are hung upside down on individual hooks so that the mops don't get tangled, especially with my very favorite barbed flogger. If I was to throw that in a toy chest, just literally throw it in, it would become so tangled I wouldn't be able to use it. You want to go through and you want to make sure that you're conditioning the leather, and you want to make sure that it is in a clean and dry place so that there's no bacteria to grow.
Yeah. Now, I have a very, very, very firm opinion on conditioners and cleaners. A lot of them have wax in them, and that will clog the pores of the leather. Lexol is one of the finest leather conditioners. I actually used to work in the leather industry, and that is all that we would use because it is a separated item. You can get 2-in-1 cleaner conditioners. I don't recommend those because most of those have some form of wax or agent in there that will clog the pores, thus causing your favorite toys to break down a whole lot faster. So Lexol comes in 2 parts. It is a cleaner, and then there is the Lexol conditioner. It is a little bit expensive, but it is one of the finest leather conditioners and cleaners that you can possibly find. And that is not a paid advertisement. That is personal experience and years of working in the leather industry.
I would also like to include, and I hope this doesn't tip us over our PG-13 rating here, take a look at your actual sex toys. Different ones are made from different products, and if they sit next to each other, they can melt together. and the materials can break down, and then you'll get cracks and creases for bacteria to grow, which can cause infections when used. I cannot stress this enough. And I think it's also important to mention that if you have any that are fluid bonded, keep them separated from your other toys. Even if you clean them 1,000 times, keep them separated.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people keep their implements in Ziploc bags when they put them in their toy chest for transport.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
On one hand, it can be very good depending on what the toy is. Again, the plastic from the Ziploc bag can break down certain toys. What I like to use is actually mason jars because the glass will keep them separated, especially for my rope. I like to keep my ropes inside mason jars because it keeps them from getting tangled, which is my biggest reason for doing that.
Yeah.
But it also keeps them separated from other implements that I use.
Yeah, on the plastic bags, like I said, I know a lot of people that when they're traveling, they will keep their implements like floggers, things of this nature in them. And I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I think it's a good idea to put them in something, but make sure that you don't leave them there. As Funsize said, hanging them up is the best way to store them. A lot of people will use tie racks to hang their floggers or things like that.
I use the command strips with hooks.
Yeah.
The little packs you can get because I have an apartment and I don't want to damage my walls hanging anything and very limited space. So I just use command strips as my cheap and effective way to hang those.
Cool.
If anyone needs any help with that.
Good recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on. When participating in impact play, know where and how to hit.
We've already gone over this a few times, but just make sure that you take those experiences and those lessons to heart, and practice is everything.
It's basically an upside down T on the back that starts right above the butt. No kidneys, no spine, around the shoulder blade area. That's good. Of course, the butt's good. Just maintain, you don't want to pop somebody behind the knees or on any joints, things of that nature. Pretty simple stuff. Watch for silent cues that something is wrong. Knowing the person and knowing these cues, there are some that are individual to people, and then there are some that are just standard, like the body turning cold. If somebody's body all of a sudden just their skin temperature, their feeling just drops and their skin gets, it's time to stop because that is shock. They are into a deep state of shock or headed that way rapidly, and you don't need to push past that point. Flushing of the skin. What else?
Extreme fatigue. That's one I actually personally hit as the bottom. When I start to tap out, as I get extreme fatigue, I'll go completely silent and I basically go limp because I just don't have it in me anymore. That's when I've hit my stopping point.
Yeah, and it would be important for somebody that you're playing with to know that, because I know other people that when they hit true subspace, that's what happens to them. So, and they get really pissed off if you quit then.
Oh, yes.
So knowing the person, having that information, very vital to that.
And that's where we go back to one of our biggest subjects, which is communication.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I will ask somebody. If I'm just doing scene play with somebody, whether I've just met them or I've known them, I need that reminder. So I will typically ask them if it's within the first few times that we've played, right before, maybe as I am shackling them up to the St. Andrew's Cross or something like that, kind of do a quick reminder of things. But that's one of the questions is, okay, when you're starting to enter subspace, what does that look like? And most of the time, they're going to be able to tell you. So that gives you a bit of information. But what's it look like when you're done? What is our signal that you are good? Does it hit immediately, or do you want pretty much like full on continuation of the heavier stuff right up until I take you down off the cross? Or do you need a period of bringing you back down, going into a more sensual style of implement use and sensation play? It's all very, very important things.
Yes.
I want it to be the best it can be. Otherwise, I just don't feel like I've done my job properly.
Right there with you.
Bondage. Now, I happen to know that you are a little rope bunny.
Just a little.
So most people who are rope bunnies also like multiple forms of bondage.
Mm-hmm.
So for this section, I'm going to consider you an expert on this topic because I know you've got years and hours and hours and hours of practice. Talk about safety when it comes to bondage.
Okay, number one thing for me, the 2-finger rule. What this is if you cannot fit 2 fingers between yourself, your 2 fingers, and the implement of bondage you're using, whether it's rope, handcuffs, anything, then it is too tight. And you need to go back and rework and loosen it because you risk cutting off circulation and doing nerve damage at that point. Which brings me to my next point, which is actually watching for those risks. You can check circulation by pressing on fingernails and then counting to see how long it takes for that fingernail to go from white to a healthy color again. For me, I'd say anything longer than about the count of 4, I loosen up, I rework the ropes as a rigger, or I request that the ropes be reworked as a rope bunny. Because for me, it's instantaneous. But I feel like that's something that you should also test out before you rig anyone, just to see what their median, what their regular response for circulation is going to be. Keep ropes off joints. Never put a rope or any other form of bondage on someone's joint. You can go around the joint, but never put it on joints. Joints are extremely fragile things. We already talked about the silk ties, how I am so against silk ties for bondage. So against them. But I'd also like to talk about bondage tape. Bondage tape is something that was very popular a few years ago. In my local circles, it's lost its popularity. I don't know if that's true for everywhere, but that is true for here. But what it is a lightly adhesive tape used for wrapping and for bondage. But it's very thin with very almost sharp edges. So what you'll get is almost paper cut like marks if it's bound too tightly, and it's so easy to bind it too tightly because you cannot see through it or around it if you're, say, practicing mummification, which is a complete wrap on someone. So it's very easy to do damage to your bottom using that. So I am somewhat against bondage tape, but at the same time, I feel like it does have its uses if it's used sparingly and carefully. I would also...
Yeah, let me throw in there that the medical term for that is Curlex, is what that bondage tape is. It is a medically used tape. It replaces Band-Aids or an actual adhesive med tape for adhering bandages around a column being a limb, which is why it is great for bondage. But like you said, there are a lot of risks with it. So I would consider that an advanced form of bondage implement.
I like how you keep throwing the word advanced out. I feel like we're going to have a talk about this off mic, like we had a talk about a month ago about me using the word absolutely so much. So be prepared for that. Back to safe bondage, I would say to have quick releases available and safety shears on hand at all times. Quick releases are ties that you can put into your rigging where they quickly release that tie. It's kind of a fail-safe so that you can get someone out of the ropes very quickly if need be. And safety shears are a specific type of shear made with a curved edge along the bottom, which goes towards your submissive or bottom skin and is able to cut the rope very quickly, or any other implement you're using. If you're using handcuffs, of course, keep your keys on hand where you know where to find them very quickly. The longer a person is in the ropes, the more damage that can be done to them in those cases. So if you're going, oh no, I just got this rope, it's really expensive, I have to cut it now, think about the damage that you're doing to the person and stop worrying about the cost, because that does not matter. And finally, never leave a bottom restrained unattended.
Yeah.
something can go wrong within a matter of seconds. I literally mean within a matter of seconds. So you can tell your bottom that you're leaving and go where they can't see you and just be quiet for a while if you want to give them that illusion of fear of being abandoned, but don't actually ever leave them. I cannot stress that enough. Since you went to your rope demo last night, have you picked up any new safe tips for us today?
Yeah, on those quick releases, carabiners can work really nice for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are certain knots that are quick release. Frictions. That's the thing is in rope work, you're not actually tying knots because knots compress, meaning that once weight is applied to them, they will compress down or tighten, making it very difficult for you to undo. Depending on the knot. So learning frictions, which appears to be a knot, but it's not. The knot itself, when weight is applied to it, is not going to compress. It's not going to become tighter. It's not going to become difficult. There's all kinds of videos online that you can learn about this stuff. Like I said, in the membership site, I'm going to have a course on rope play itself. There's actually several different courses, and within these, there's going to be several different videos made for each section. So that's one of the big things is knots versus frictions. I think one of the biggest things that was confirmed for me last night, and I've done rope play moderately for over 20 years, and I've always considered it kind of edge play, especially when it gets into suspension and things like that. And that was really confirmed for me last night. And I'm not going to make the joke about it being an advanced thing or any of that, but that is one craft that takes so long to learn and years and years and years of practice to master. But it's beautiful. It's fun. A lot of people don't have the patience for it because it does take so much time to learn and to implement as you are participating in rope play. But yeah, I think that was the main thing that I really got out of last night because a lot of what was shown, a lot of what was talked about, I already was very aware of. It was nice to have several, and there were people from all over the Southeast that came to help with not just the presentation, but the actual implementation of the hands-on stuff, is that it really is, especially, like I said, when you get into suspensions and things like that, a form of edge play. What do you think about that? Because I know your experience.
I would definitely have to agree, and that's a big part of why you cannot leave your bottom restrained and unattended. When you are up in those ropes, and you think of being alone and not being able to touch the ground, and you don't know when you're going to be released, when you're going to come down, any of that, it can enter your mind so deeply as a fear and ride right on the edge of panic almost. And if you end up having a panic attack in those ropes, it is such a safety risk. So yeah, I definitely have to agree that it is 100% edge play.
Another thing, and you mentioned this already, but when it comes to cutting your rope, if you have a rope that you are so in love with that you would hesitate at all, and I mean literally at all, in cutting it, then don't use it.
That's right.
It's not worth it. When you said that things can go from good to bad in a matter of a second, yeah, that is no joke. And at the demo last night, before we actually got into the 101 and the hands-on training, as usual, there was a demonstration of what we would be learning. There was a suspension done, and she had to be cut down. And it was due to pain. And there's typically two reasons why somebody's going to need to be cut down. It's either an immediate pain situation, or three reasons: a health risk or a psychological need. So with her last night, it became an imminent pain issue, and there was absolutely no hesitation. As soon as she said it, his shears were in his hand and the rope was being cut, and she was being let down to the ground gently and tended to. In fact, the demo took a brief break while he tended to her needs, and they went outside, kind of walked it off a little bit, And I guess it was probably about 20 minutes that they came back in, and then we continued with his presentation. So it doesn't matter how much experience people have, doesn't matter how fond of the rope you are, it does not matter. Whatever you want to throw up, whatever reason you want to give to not cut somebody down when they need to be cut down is just a BS excuse for you being way too more in love with your rope than you are with human life or human safety. Cannot stress that enough. And to me, that's not beating a dead horse. That is trying to make people understand just how truly important it is. All right. So let's move into other safety practices and tips.
Okay, so the big one is being mindful of your partner's temperature. And you already mentioned this before, but often an extreme drop in temperature means the body is near or going into shock. That's a huge thing to watch for. You really should stop play at that point and make sure that your partner is okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean that just the bottom could be experiencing this, because I have seen tops experience this as well.
I've experienced that as a top.
Yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Especially when you're getting into these really long scenes, it can be extremely, extremely exhausting. So it does happen.
Yes, because I mean, a lot of what we do is really physically traumatic for us. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just means that it's a shock to our systems. So we really need to watch temperature and regulate body function. And that, I can't stress that enough.
One of the funniest things that I have seen with one of my friends is a scheduled period of about 4 hours between he and his wife when they were just getting into things, and they expected it to last that long.
It's nice to have those windows of time available, especially if you have a lengthy aftercare need or something of that variety. But I mean, scenes vary in timing. We all know that. They can last, anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours.
But their goal,
it just depends.
The funny part was their goal was to occupy this entire 4-hour time period, and they did, but only 20 minutes of it, maybe 25 or 30, was the actual playtime. The rest of it was the lead up, the talk. Like I said, they were new, so I insisted that they still ask the important questions that I mentioned earlier before they got started, and then the aftercare. And they did have a very, very long aftercare. And but they thought that just the scene itself was going to take, 4 hours. And they were both so incredibly exhausted. They're like, wow, I didn't realize. Like, yeah, I know you didn't, and that's okay.
Well, I mean, there are scenes that can actually last that long.
Well, yeah, I've
but
participated in a lot of them. But
it depends on the people and the intensity.
Well, I'm bringing this up just to say that, when you're new, because this is a 101 podcast, having that much time is scheduled is a good thing, but don't force yourself to try to fill it. It's very exhausting. You don't realize just how exhausting it can be. And don't push yourself past your own personal limits, whether you're top or bottom.
Yes. Sorry for interrupting your point there. I definitely agree with your idea.
No problem. I probably wasn't making myself as clear as I should have. Oh, here we go. The next thing with safety practices and tips. STDs and STIs. Now, nobody wants that gift that keeps on giving. And let's be honest, a lot of people these days have these types of gifts. So, safe practices. Everybody knows condoms. A lot of people refuse to use them, but everybody knows about them. There are also other things. So aside from condoms, what do you have to offer up there?
100% biggest one, education and communication. Talk to your partner about their previous sexual partners and activities and get proof that they are STD and STI free before you're willing to play with them, whether it's a non-sexual scene, a vanilla partner, or otherwise. 100%.
My biggest thing is don't be ashamed if you're one of the people that happen to have something.
My thing with that was don't be so ashamed that you cannot be honest with your partner about it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You got to tell, you got to share that information. And, if you don't, there's actually legal actions that a person can take against you in most states for that, especially if it's one that has massive potential for death.
In the state of Montana where I live, if you knowingly pass on HIV, it is actually an attempted murder charge.
Yeah.
Which is a huge legal ramification, which can be avoided with a simple free test at a local clinic and a honest conversation most of the time.
Yeah, I know our testing here in Tennessee is you can do a flat fee or an income-based testing, but it's ridiculously cheap. I think in most cases it's going to run you about the cost of a coffee at Starbucks or something like that. So get these tests done, play safe, don't screw around with somebody else's health.
That's absolutely right.
It's really that simple. Can't stress it enough. I just cannot fathom why people are so ridiculously selfish that they won't tell somebody. And that's what it is. It's selfishness. You don't want to, whether it's out of, you don't want to be judged or you don't want to miss out on the opportunity to play with somebody or have sex with somebody, or you're ashamed of it. Because if you pass it on, then imagine the shame that's going to come from that. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's stupid. Just be open and honest. And I'm very passionate about this because I know somebody that's got herpes from somebody who did not tell. And it's rather new. They just found out. It's a really good friend of mine. They only have one play partner, so it could have only come from that one person. And they've talked about it. And they knew that they had it and didn't say anything. They knew that they've had it for, I think, 3 years. And they've been playing for about a year, and over and over and over, there have been these questions. They have gone to get tested for things together, but one was foolish and didn't actually see the test results, took their word for it, and, oh, well, I forgot them. I'll bring them over next time. I'll bring them over next time. I'll bring them over next time. And it just never happened. So, yeah, I'm a little bit harsh, a little bit aggravated right now as I talk about this because it is very new. It is a very good friend of mine. And though herpes is not one of these intensely bad things anymore, it's easily treated. It's still just the concept of it that somebody knew that they were going to pass this along and they didn't say anything. It just ticks me off to no end. So I really need to get off of this topic unless you have anything else that you'd like to say briefly.
No, for this topic, I think we've covered it pretty well, and I'm going to let you take a step back from it.
All right. Know your partner's health conditions and allergies before play. That is a very important thing, especially today with so many people being allergic to latex.
I was actually about to ask you, hypothetically, would you ever ask me to wear latex? Because you and I have actually talked off mic about my slight allergy to latex.
Absolutely not.
And you would say absolutely not. And I know about your health conditions, so there are definitely things I would not ever ask of you if we were to be doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's honesty, it's common sense, it's respect above all else. Have that respect to not only the other person, but also to yourself. Because there again, I find a lot of people that don't want to say no out of obligation, but that's something I respect you enough that I would never ask that of you. And you respect yourself enough to inform me of that allergy. So,
yes.
Pretty simple concept there. It all really is, though. Take care of mental and emotional safety, keeping an open line of communication.
That's what ended my last relationship with my last dominant, was there was not open lines of communication. So that's a huge thing that I have to throw out there to make sure people understand that that is so vitally important. And we bring this up in every episode for just this reason.
And I would go so far to say that most relationships are going to end because of the communication issue. Some people that I'm helping out right now, they've got some serious communication issues because they're too afraid to hurt the other person. And they're going to hear this, and this is nothing that I haven't already told them, but they need to stop being afraid. They need to stop trying to use somebody in the middle to vent their frustrations about this issue, because there wouldn't be a need to vent if they would just go to each other, have that uncomfortable conversation, and if they need, have a mediator there. But a mediator is not a middleman or a middle woman. That is not because that is someone that gets griped to when the other person is not around. And that's drama. Get away from it. Let it go. Just have these uncomfortable conversations. And it's much better, because if things end between them, it's going to be bad. If they would just have these conversations and be open and honest with each other, then if it ended, they're still going to be friends. They're going to maintain a friendship. They're just going to be adult about it and realize, hey, we can't come together on these issues. So let's just go back to being what we've been for years, which is friends. And if you need help vetting somebody, or if you need help with changing the oil in your car, I remember way back when talking to you, it may have been in your initial interview, you said that 2 months prior to that conversation, you had even called your very first master, your original trainer, asking him about how to change the oil in your car.
Yes.
I'll never forget that. I know that you two, when it was time to end things, that open communication and honesty was there. And I think that's a great example.
Yes.
That here it is, that was 12 years ago that you started. That lasted for, if I'm not mistaken, about a year and a half.
Yep, it's been about a decade, and actually I've had 3 or 4 conversations with him this week alone, just catching up on things.
Yeah.
Because we are still friends.
And how sad would that be to look back at your very first BDSM relationship and not be able to think of it fondly because you have resentments because one of you was just too whatever to have these important conversations? I mean,
it would absolutely break my heart, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And that's what I went through last year, because my last slave, that relationship ended because of a total communication breakdown. And there are still some parts of that, here it is nearly a year later, that quite honestly still affect me, and has a lot to do with my willingness to participate in further serious BDSM relationships. It does cause a hesitation, because I have to be very certain that if there was a person that I was going to enter into that type of relationship with again, that communication has to come first.
Yes.
And I know that you agree with me on that, but I feel it important to throw that out there. Also, on that emotional safety, pride. I think when it comes to calling safe words, especially for a top, pride gets in the way. They think that they can't do that because they're the domly dom, they're the toppy top. They can't do that, and fire at will on that one.
For me, when I top, it's actually a sign of how much I care for my bottom, how much I respect them, that I will call. I will make those calls. It has nothing to do with my pride, would keep me from it. It's actually my pride in being able to give them what they need above everything else, including myself, that makes me make those calls. And I think that's important for all tops to use.
Yeah. For me, there's 3 types of pride. There is the well-known foolish pride.
Mm-hmm.
There is the misplaced pride. And then there is the healthy amount of pride. And I think a lot of cases it is just misplaced. Like you just stated, your pride is in treating them well, them seeing that you care about them. That is healthy. But for those people who are too proud to call a scene, I don't really think that that's necessarily foolish pride. I think it's misplaced, that you need to understand where that real act of pride comes from, or the act that would create a sense of pride, where that comes from. So I think it's an interesting differentiating factor there. So what else do you have? Is there anything else that you want to bring up? This has been a long one, as requested.
I actually would like to quickly jump back into the pride thing from the submissive perspective. And you've said this a couple times throughout the episode, that sometimes a submissive feels it's their obligation to say yes. Well, sometimes it's also a submissive's thought process that you can't say no, because to be a good submissive and to have the pride of being a good submissive, you can't say no and you can't stop a scene. And that's simply not true. Your true pride as a submissive should come from how well you communicate with your top, with your dominant, to make the most of the experiences that you share with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means saying no and calling stop to things. So I just want to throw that in real quickly.
And that's part of my negotiation process with my submissives, is that it's so important to me that they know that their safety comes first and that I don't just say it. I absolutely mean it, and that they have an obligation to me to make sure that they communicate that to me when we are scening, or in any other case. If it's something that I'm requiring or requesting of them that is too psychologically taxing outside of a scene, that they communicate that to me, whether it's psychological, physical, whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the basis for that would be absolutely communication. But I can say with pride that every submissive that I have been in a relationship, my current bottom, Percusio, she absolutely knows that it brings me joy when she will call a scene or tell me that something needs to be adjusted in a scene, or will gesture a 5 on a pain scale because that's when it's become too intense, or throw up a fist in the middle of a scene, which means that we need to change implements. You know, that communication, very important. And that can be very hard or very simple for some people to grasp. You just have to stress, as the top or the dominant, how important that is to you. So she really understands that. She knows that that's going to put a smile on my face when she communicates with me. So she does strive to perfect those communication skills. And if you want more information, like Funsize said earlier on that, join the FetLife group. Just search for KuldrinsKrypt.com or Kuldrin's Krypt on FetLife, and it will come up with the group. And make sure you go through the stickies and the rules. Main thing there is respect, because that's going to eliminate any drama. I don't allow that on there. Other than that, I welcome any and all comments. I think, unless you've got anything else, that's going to wrap it up.
Nope. I think we've covered basic safety really, really well. And of course, if they have any further questions, they can feel free to comment or contact us.
Yeah, I would like to say, I know that because there is so much to basic safety, I'm certain that there's going to be a whole lot of people listen to this and think, well, you left this out, you left this out. Please tell us what we've left out. We want that dialogue. We want that communication, obviously. So join that FetLife group. I'm actually going to move away from Facebook for our group and strictly stick to FetLife, because there's so much more social interaction there, probably because people are a little weary about being outed in the Facebook group, even though there is a secret Facebook group as well that I started just for the members of the website, but I'm going to do away with that too and keep it all to FetLife. And that's where the giveaways will take place. I've just received an order of t-shirts, so I'm probably going to be giving away some Kuldrin's Krypt t-shirts in the upcoming months as well. And I know Funsize, I need to send you and Irish Mountain Dragon some t-shirts.
Yes, please.
And I would also like to announce that we have a special Funsize t-shirt coming out, or tank top for women or men, I guess, if you like. But there's still a little dispute as to what it's going to say. We would like your input on this. But Funsize, go ahead. What do you want it to say?
Well, the suggestion was actually thrown at me by one of my best friends who is a listener. I'm going to call her Bratty Red just because she's not on FetLife, and I think that's the perfect name for her.
She needs to be.
She does need to be, but she unfortunately still identifies as vanilla with spice. Her suggestion was for the tank tops to say, I want to get fun-sized. So throw us your other suggestions or any comments you have on that one. We would love to hear them, and I will definitely be sharing those with her because she very much loves this show.
Yeah, and my suggestion was just shortening it to Funsize me. So you guys vote. Tell us what you think. Somebody will create a thread on FetLife for that. So either way, they're going to get out or they're going to get made. Just need to know some sizes, and I will have some to give away and also some to sell. So I'll post all that information in the FetLife group. And that's going to wrap up this conversation for today. Next week on the Krypt, we're going to get into discussing everything that you need to know about your first play party. In the meantime, go to KuldrinsKrypt.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and and the link to our FetLife group so you can take part in the conversation over there and be eligible for those giveaways. While you're there, click on the Support Us tab to be a Patreon supporter. Like we said, we are trying to reach that goal of $30 a month. Right now, we're sitting at $12 a month. So in order to maintain weekly episodes, unfortunately, I'm going to have a little listener support. We do have a sponsor, but again, that sponsor does not give monetarily. They give in the form of products for us to use as giveaway items to help with the listener. That is bdsmcontracts.org. And I didn't say this earlier, but if you go to their website, you're interested in purchasing from them, which I highly recommend, even as just an example, if it's not something that you're going to use the coupon code Kuldrin20. That is KULDRIN20, no spaces, for 20% discount off of your entire purchase. That is going to do it for today. Thanks for listening, and I cannot wait, Funsize, to talk to you about this play party thing. I have been going to play party after play party recently, extremely active again, and I'm loving it. So this is a topic that I've got a lot of information to throw out there, as I know you do as well. So I will talk to you next week.
All right. See you then.
This has been Master Kuldrin and Funsize for KuldrinsKrypt.com. Unearth the truth.